Ever since the beginning of the game, there have always been brawler trios, which is obviously a group of 3 similar brawlers. There are multiple ways they are determined, and today we'll be going over all the full trios to see how they came to be. So let's just get right into it. First up, let's actually look at why it is even trios and not like duos or squads. Well, the main reason for that is because Brawl Stars started as a game with only solo and trio game modes. So, the trios are basically like different teams of brawlers that mostly exist in the lore of the game, rather than in the actual gameplay. However, it's still interesting. But anyways, let's actually get into the trios, with the first one being the Ranger Ranch Trio. This trio consists of Shelly, Spike, and Colt, and all of them share a similar Wild West theme. Colt and Shelly are both rangers and are pretty similar as sharpshooters with guns. Shelly using a shotgun, and Colt using revolvers. And then you have Spike, who is a cactus. That obviously fits into the Wild West theme, but he is also seen as the sidekick of Colt and Shelly. All of them live at the Ranger Ranch, which is really where this trio comes from. Next up, we have the Gold Arm Gang trio, which consists of Sam, Belle, and Pearl. Now this also fits well with the Wild West theme, and this trio is basically the enemy of the Rangers since they're a notorious gang. But this is what I'd say is one of the most interesting trios in the game, as it is actually based off of real life. There used to be 2 people named Sam and Belle Starr, and they were married in real life. They actually committed crimes back in the 1800s, which fits perfectly with the Wild West theme. They even had a daughter named Pearl, so that's obviously where this trio comes from. It's just very interesting and unique. But next up, let's go with the Retropolis Gang trio, which consists of Bull, BB, and Crow. This is obviously another gang, like the Gold Arm Gang. However, it's not quite as interesting, since so far it doesn't seem like they really commit any crimes. They mostly just hang out at the diner, and that's about it. They're pretty mysterious, and they all have kind of a gothic style, especially in their default skins, where they wear dark clothing. You can think of them as a gang that acts tough, but doesn't really do anything. But let's switch it up for the next one and go with the Mexican Entertainers trio. This trio consists of El Primo, Poco, and Amber. All of these are pretty bright and colorful brawlers, and they all do some sort of entertainment. El Primo is a pretty popular wrestler, and his style actually originates from Mexico. Poco is a musician, and he is also obviously very Mexican themed. Then you have Amber, who is a performer that really just plays a lot with fire. I suppose she got grouped into this trio for the entertainment factor, so this is obviously a pretty cool trio. Another similar one is the Stunt Show trio, which has Stu, Janet, and Bonnie. Stu is a brawler that has been doing stunts for a very long time, and he's interesting because he balances only on one wheel. Janet and Bonnie are both sisters, with Janet being the older and more experienced one, better at performing stunts. Bonnie is just the little sister who is getting into doing stunts herself, but obviously still needs help from Janet a lot of the time. So this is another entertainment trio, which is pretty cool. But next up we have the Townsfolk trio, which consists of Barley, Piper, and Byron. This trio exists because each of these brawlers has a job in the town. Barley is obviously a bartender, Piper is a baker, and then there's Byron, who is a bit interesting. He's actually one of the most controversial brawlers as part of a trio, because he doesn't exactly seem to fit in. Most people believe he's included because he is like a merchant who sells things, which would kind of be like running a shop or business. But the exact reason isn't super clear. But anyway, let's move on to the gift shop trio, which includes Griff, Edgar, and Colette. Griff is the owner of the gift shop, which seems to be a failing business. Edgar is just a normal employee there who doesn't really like his job, and Colette is like a big customer, as she has to collect all sorts of stuff from the gift shop. So, this is definitely one of the more well-defined trios. Before the addition of Griff, people had thought that Byron was the owner of the gift shop. However, that would obviously be untrue, but it was still interesting. But anyways, let's move on to the arcade trio, which consists of 8-Bit, Rico, and Brock. This one makes a lot of sense because 8-Bit is one of those shooter arcade machines. Rico is a gumball machine, which is commonly found at arcades. And Brock is just a massive gamer who would obviously be found at an arcade. So, this is a pretty easy trio to figure out, and logically makes a lot of sense. Next up, we have the Shaman Tribe Trio, which consists of Bo, Nita, and Leon. All three of these really represent some sort of animal you can find in the wild, and they also use relatively primitive attacks. Bo obviously uses a bow and arrow, represents an eagle, and is known to have lived in the jungle for a while. Nita clearly represents a bear, and even has a bear as part of her super, which is the main thing that puts her in this trio. And then there's Leon, who represents a chameleon and is a close-range brawler that uses spinning blades to attack. But next up we have the Junker Family Trio, which consists of Pam, Nani, and Jessie. Now Pam and Jessie are mother and daughter, and both of them are kind of technical. They like to work at the junkyard, making stuff or tinkering around with things. Then, Nani is a nanny for Jessie, which is why she is a part of this trio. Next up, we have the Undead Trio, which consists of Frank, Mortis, and Emps. Frank is basically like Frankenstein, so it makes sense how he is undead. Then you have Mortis, who represents a vampire and is also a mortician by profession, so there's a clear connection there. And then Emps is just the niece of Mortis, and she also kind of looks like a mummy with her bandages. But next up, we have the Brawlywood Trio, which includes Lola, Miko, and Gray. All three of these are pretty different from each other, but they also obviously relate back to Brawlywood. Lola is like the main actress there, and she's also shown to have a big ego. Miko is really just a sound guy who works behind the scenes, but he does go on camera a lot. He also has a big ego and doesn't seem to be the most pleasant guy to be around. As for Gray, well, he is kind of cool because he's an actor, but he does it for the older black and white films, which is interesting. Overall, this trio does make a lot of sense. But next up, let's go with something similar, which is the Star Theater Trio. This is made up of Fang, Buster, and Macy. Fang is here because he just watches a ton of movies at the theater and is fully absorbed in them. Buster actually works at the movie theater, and he did steal one of the projectors from there. As for Macy, well, she is a bit interesting. She doesn't exactly fit too well. Her occupation in the game is a safety coordinator, which obviously doesn't make sense for a theater. However, her hair does look a lot like popcorn, so I suppose that's what really makes her a part of this trio, which is definitely a little more interesting. But anyways, next up, we have the Pirates Trio, which consists of Penny, Daryl, and Tick. Penny is really like the main pirate brawler, as she has an eye patch and is overall just themed around pirates. Daryl actually has two things about him that make him a good fit for this trio. First of all, he has a pirate hat and technically works as a pirate. But the other thing is that he is essentially a wooden barrel, which really resembles what pirates used on pirate ships, or really any ships back when these types of pirates existed. Then, as for Tick, well, he just follows Penny around, and that's how he ended up in this trio, despite not being very pirate-like himself. But next up, we have the Gem Miners Trio, and this consists of Dynamite, Jackie, and Carl. Dynamite uses dynamite to mine, since blowing stuff up is a pretty good way of going about things when it comes to mining. Jackie obviously uses her jackhammer to mine for stuff, and then Carl is just a mining robot who rides around in a minecart and uses a pickaxe to mine. So overall, I'd say that this trio is one of the best when it comes to similarities between the brawlers, since all of them do pretty similar things, unlike some of the other trios we went over earlier. Next up, we have the Mystic Wanderers Trio, which consists of Tara, Jean, and Sandy. This one is really cool and just a nice trio in general because they all actually look alike physically. They are all pink themed and clearly look like a trio. Tara is here because she has a card reader, which is obviously some mystical and mysterious thing. Jean is basically a genie, so he obviously fits right in. But Sandy is a little different. He's the younger brother of Tara, and there isn't exactly anything mystical about him. However, he is here because he just fits in with Tara. But next up, we have another color-coded trio, and that is the Superheroes Trio, which is made up of Surge, Max, and Meg. Surge and Max are really like the main superheroes in the trio, and they are the most popular ones. Meanwhile, Meg is more in the background, and she's really there to fix things when they go wrong. All three of them are obviously very much red and yellow themed, which is pretty nice. Next up, we have the Snowtail Trio, and this is made up of Mr. P, Gale, and Lou. This is a very winter-themed trio, and the brawlers clearly reflect that. Mr. P is the owner of the Snowtail, which is obviously reflected in the name of the trio. Gale works at the Snowtail as a snowblower, and then you have Lou, who sticks around in the area to try and sell snow cones to people. So this is obviously a well-defined trio. Next up, we have the Biology trio, which is made up of Bee, Sprout, and Rosa. This is overall a nature-themed trio. Obviously, you have Bee, who represents bees, and then you have Sprout, who is a guardian robot, and Rosa, who is a botanist. All this is pretty cool, as it's a wholesome trio overall, unlike the next one, which is the Star Force trio. This is made up of Ruffs, Squeak, and Eve. Now, this is a pretty strange one, in my opinion, since all the brawlers are quite different. Ruffs is like the main guy since he is the commander of the ship and basically runs the show. He's also a serious character, but then you have Squeak, who just made a drug duel from Ruffs, which is kind of gross. And then you also have Eve, who's like an alien, and it almost seems out of character. Ruffs and Eve should be enemies, but they obviously aren't, so it's a little confusing. It's one of the strangest trios. But finally, we have the Candyland trio, which got completed with the addition of Barry. The other two brawlers were Chester and Mandy. Now, this is basically like a candy shop. Mandy runs the shop, and Chester joins the trio as basically a big troll. He is really targeting Mandy inside the candy shop, so I guess that makes sense. Then you have Barry, who works at the candy shop, so he's a pretty obvious addition. The Deep Sea trio contains Otis, who is a strange sea dweller that has a love for art. Hank is a war general that keeps things strict, including keeping Otis in line, and Clancy follows Hank's orders very seriously. Oh yeah, and I think he might be insane. And now we have the Ghost Station trio, with Chuck, Gus, and Shade. They all have a sort of a connection with trains and Ghost, with Chuck being the train machinist, Gus just playing around on the train station, and Shade, who is a ghost who came to life and instantly became friends with Gus. There are still a lot of unfinished trios, but these ones are the completed ones for now. But I still do hope that you guys enjoy this video, and I'll see you all in the next one.